Hello, my name is Miguel Resendiz. I'm a marketing professional, entrepreneur, and the host of this podcast, Midcast, a program where we discuss how to monetize your talent, ideas, and show examples of people who have successfully done so in the past. In this podcast, we aim to bring the best business and life insights to help you materialize your goals. An open mind will go a long way in this program, so fasten your seatbelts and get ready for the show. In 3, 2, 1. Welcome once again to yet another episode of your favorite podcast, Midcast. Today, I have the pleasure to talk to a human rights activist and a healthcare worker, Trystan Jones. How are you, Trystan?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Miguel. I really appreciate the invitation to be on this podcast.
Yeah, well, you have done some pretty impressive work, and I read your material for your talk. So, do you mind giving us a little bit of background of where you're from and what inspired you to begin working in human rights?
Yeah. My name is Trystan Jones. I'm from a small community in northern British Columbia called Fort St. John. Fort St. John is it's a very old settlement in British Columbia. It's one of the oldest European settlements in ever. It was founded a number of years ago. I first got involved into human rights activism due to my experiences growing up in Fort St. John. For anyone who can't tell, I am of mixed race. I claim half Chinese descent and half English, sort of British descent. And I've been the target. I was the target of racism and discrimination and prejudice all growing up. And at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, I, like many people, was forced to move home after years of being away. And the pandemic really highlighted some of the problems that my community still struggled with, and that was specifically anti-Asian racism at the time, but just racism as a whole. And I was the target of someone's intolerance at a local grocery store, and it kind of just sparked something in me, and I ended up going viral a little in my small circle, I guess you could say, on Facebook, and I kind of springboarded that into helping to spark the conversation in Fort St. John. After it was only a couple of weeks later that George Floyd tragically died in Minnesota, and the protests that we saw kind of ignite across the United States were felt here in Canada as well. And I helped to organize and to mobilize some people in my community, and it was through that I was told about the opportunity to give a TED Talk at my university, Simon Fraser, through their TEDx affiliate. And I kind of threw a shot in the dark to see if I could get a chance to speak at such a prestigious conference. And I was quite fortunate to hear that they were interested in having me come and speak. That's I gave my talk in November, and we're still kind of just waiting for it to be released publicly, but that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. So I actually looked into the requirements to apply for the talk in TEDx or TED Talk, sorry. And so apparently for this particular one, you have to kind of bring a topic about doing something in an unconventional way. Is that correct? So I'm wondering now, what was it that you do, or how do you approach human rights activism in an unconventional way? What part of it is unconventional?
So the theme of the conference this year was unravel. We were unraveling all sorts of various stories and different types of ideas and concepts. Mine in particular, my talk, I really wanted to focus on the fact that racism in rural communities is not really discussed in the modern dialogue, especially here in Canada. In Canada, one of our biggest, I guess, how would I say, one of our biggest like downfalls is that we take a look at our friends to the south and we think that we couldn't be any worse than that, right? Like we're not nearly as brutal when it comes to racism as the United States, but that's just not true. And one of the things I wanted to discuss was and I wanted to really shine a light on is the stories that aren't told about racism in rural communities. And I also wanted to kind of spotlight some of the harsh realities that goes with these sorts of conversations. One of the things when I was beginning my protests, and one of the things I discussed during the application process was about how when I was wanting to engage with people, it was always just about the conversation. One of the primary things that I was constantly having to explain was what all lives matter meant, and why all lives matter is seen as being negative in the conversation about human rights. And I always found that every single person who came to me and to discuss this always left with a complete understanding of the issue. And it was just the fact that someone decided to sit there and have this conversation instead of yelling at them and making them sound silly or invalidating their beliefs without, explaining why it is that there's a difference in an outlook. And I think that's a big part of it is like I've always stressed the personal connection and the individual, and to push for change, because in these rural communities, that's what's going to change these sorts of outlooks, is by having these conversations, because no one else is, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, dialogue for the longest time has been the thing that keep us sane, or that keep our societies moving forward, right?
Yes.
So just a little bit I hope I'm not putting you in the spot here, but
Nope.
what does all life matter mean to you?
All lives matter. For me, it's kind of a misconstrued and really convenient type of messaging that really just doesn't address the issues at play. When we say all lives matter, all lives don't really matter right now. This was something that was quite clear to me in my community when I was doing these protests. It was there was a very tragic sort of tableau of this whole situation in Fort St. John, where we were holding our protests. It was on the corner of 100th and 100th. That's the main street area, the main drag. There is a large park on that corner, or it covers about like half a block where this hotel once was. And there's a couple of picnic benches, and it has become kind of like the known haunt for I would say displaced and homeless Indigenous peoples in Fort St. John. And so when we were doing our protests, like tragically, like there was 3 or 4 Indigenous homeless peoples that were sitting and drinking, and it was just a tragic image that of the fact that their lives have been failed by the system. I remember having a chat with a couple of them like during the talk, during our protests, because they were confused as to why our sign said Black Lives Matter when Indigenous lives don't matter up north. And that was something that really stuck with me, and was something that I think really explains that, is that all lives don't matter now. In this case, Indigenous lives didn't matter, and that was clear. Some of the photos that were published in the local newspaper, the Alaska Highway News, had that very just tragic image of these people who the system have failed just in the background. And I think it just showed why all lives don't matter. And I think it shows why saying that is just an injustice to the situation.
Yeah, okay. And why do you think there's the need for some people to respond to Black Lives Matter or other movements with things such as All Lives Matter and Blue Lives
Mhm.
Matter?
Yeah, it's something I've studied in university. I majored in political science, focusing on international issues, and one of the classes I took was on human rights. And one of the things I remember learning in this, I think it was a second or third year class, was about how in a lot of situations where there is very clearly two tiers of society, whether it's separated by race or religion or gender or what have you. Like currently, like in this conversation, we're discussing the separation between white people and people of color. The white people at the top hold the rights, and for the people below who are starting to gain rights, such as like in the civil rights movement days in the 60s when segregation ended, or like gaining the right to vote, all of this being the gender pay gap closing, you know what I mean? Like as these rights are being added onto these other citizens who didn't have it, there's a conception that the other people's rights are being taken away. And in some respect, like that is true, but in the same respect, they're only doing that so that everyone can have the same. And so I think it's an insecurity, and I think it's also perhaps a um, how would I say, it's the fact that people that have been put in these privileged positions don't truly understand the privileged position they are in, and when they see other people trying to aspire to that and to gain to that, they view it as an affront to them, an attack on them. And I think that's quite problematic, and why dialogue should be continuing in a more open forum where and we're less judgment, you know.
Yeah. So you said that some people, to some extent, are losing rights with these social movements. So what kind of rights are people losing?
I wouldn't say when okay, I guess it's I wouldn't say losing. It's the perception that they're losing rights because say now the instead of hiring all white people, we also now have to hire a couple people of color, or instead of like say an entire um, say someone is being put up for a job, and because the the affirmative action or whatever policies have dictated that they need to hire a person of color so as to increase diversity. Uh, that the person, the white guy who was up for that position, probably feels that he is having his rights taken away because he is not eligible for that position because he is not a person of color. But in there's a fallacy in that, because the only reason that needs to happen is because white people have always traditionally been in that position to get that job. Do you understand?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah,
So you when you tried, well, you didn't try, but you kind of mentioned how sometimes in Canada we look at our neighbor of the south, and
yeah.
oftentimes we feel like we're not as bad as they are. And and so you mentioned in your talk that Canada has a different type of immigration or immigrant assimilation to their communities, right? So you talk about the
Yes.
Mosaic and the melting pot,
Mhm.
kind of like model. So what are the differences between both of them, and why? Which one would you think is better? And if none of them are good, what are the other alternatives?
Yeah. So the Mosaic model and the melting pot model are they're quite well-known terms in terms of immigration policy. The melting pot model is what the United States has, and in the United States, the way that they frame their immigration is they hope that all new immigrants would give up their identities and their cultures, and so as to take on that American identity for themselves, sort of mixing into this melting pot that is the American identity. The Mosaic model, however, is different. In Canada, we instead what we hope for is for immigrants to keep their cultures and their ideologies and their religions, and become and create sort of like pocket cultures, a sort of mosaic, as it were. That's where the name comes from. Is you have these little these cultures that can all kind of can stay themselves true to themselves and create communities within their own communities. For me, in my TED talk, I discuss how the Mosaic model at face appears to be so much more culturally sensitive, and it seems to be the more respectful of the two models in terms of immigration. But I have some key issues with it, being that there isn't enough support for immigration to rural communities. One of the things that I discuss in the talk is that all it does is really create barriers, because these people are immigrating, say, to my hometown of Fort St. John, and they come for economic prospects. There's lots of money in the area. It's filled with oil and natural gas reserves, so it's a great place for new immigrants to come and earn their money and perhaps start a family. The problem being, though, that there isn't enough education regarding new cultures, and there isn't enough support for new immigrants to sort of assimilate and to learn about the society, and there isn't enough interest from the people themselves to learn about these people, instead seeing them as coming in and they're foreign, and they're changing languages on signs, and they're taking our jobs, and that in itself is dangerous, and it breeds divides. And there is many a story I can talk about and touch on about the families or the children of immigrants who have come and expected a whole new world once they've come to Canada, and the harsh realities of racism in the rural communities has really turned them off from immigrating or migrating into these smaller communities, and they tend to stick towards the cities, and I think that's tragic, and it's a injustice, and it's honestly the rural communities are missing out on the amazing talent that can come from immigration, and the brain power, you know.
Yeah. So how do you think we can solve this? And is this the duty of the government, or is this something that we as individuals need to start working on? And also, how do you incentivize individuals to start working on this? Because look, I can kind of understand the insecurities, right?
Yep.
Especially if you have been, let's say, in one of these rural communities for 50 years, and all of a sudden you see people that were never living there, right? I mean, people that I don't know, like let's say maybe people from Asia, that you were not used to seeing for like 50 years, at least not in these communities. And it kind of, I think people tend to cherish the past. And I'm not really trying to justify the racism, but I can kind of understand how some people may feel that their culture may be a little bit
Yes.
invaded. And for example, I'm gonna give you an example that happened to me. So
Hmm.
I lived in Canada for, let's say, 4 or 5 years at that point, and then I went to Germany, right? And
Yeah.
uh, when I moved to Germany, I was really uncomfortable seeing only one type of people all over the place. So there was only white people, right? And I mean, because in Canada there is people from every type of people, really.
Yeah.
Like you can
Yeah.
see anyone, right? Like all the combinations there are to see, you can see them here, and then you can see them a lot. And
Hmm.
in Germany, I could only see white people, and that really freaked me out. Then I went to Mexico sometime before I went to Germany, and I was uncomfortable seeing only Mexicans. I was like, it feels really weird to be in a homogeneous country. Then when I went to
Yeah.
Japan, I felt the same, you know. And I think you're just kind of attached to the type of people you see in your community. So since I
Yes.
lived in Vancouver and I see people from everywhere in the world, so for me, looking at Asians and white people and black people and Latino people and all the type of people that you can imagine in the street, and not even paying attention to that is normal. But once I see only one type of people, it kind of feels weird. And look, I'm not saying like I hate homogeneous countries. I respect them.
Yeah.
I just feel uncomfortable because it is not what I'm used to do, and I can kind of feel or I can kind of understand their point of view. Now, the question is, so we understand this is tragic, and this is something that's leading to not only so, societal issues in these rural communities, but also economic issues, because we know that these rural communities are suffering from a lot of brain leakage, like in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
they have talent, they have really intelligent people, but because they don't have the industries, or these very intelligent people want to move to the urban areas, then they move to, let's say, Vancouver or Toronto, and then they live these small rural communities with very experienced older people, but this is not sustainable, right? So
No, 100%. And there's a very topical example from my home community has just occurred about a month ago. One of the doctors that serves at the hospital in Fort St. John wrote a public op-ed to the local newspaper addressed to the member of parliament for the Peace Region North riding for the federal government, to the sitting member of parliament being Bob Zimmer of the Conservative Party. Now, the op-ed was addressed to the member of parliament purely because the sitting member of parliament, I believe he reshared or supported a conspiracy theory that has been gaining quite a lot of traction in rural communities, something called the Great Reset. Now, this op-ed basically called out the member of parliament because he was supporting this, even though it is a debunked conspiracy theory. The letter highlighted the fact that in Fort St. John, for the COVID-19 response, the majority of doctors are of immigrant origin. Now, Fort St. John has had a huge problem with retaining physicians. They have a massive new hospital that was just built some 10 years ago that is completely understaffed. They have an ICU unit that is understaffed because no one wants to go up there and work. And the op-ed discussed how many doctors and other healthcare professionals didn't feel safe in these sorts of communities, especially when the city member of parliament shares sorts of things like this. And Fort St. John is one of the northern response units for the pandemic. And as of today, the Northern Health Region has one of the most high infection rates. And from what I know, they're shipping people south. And with the fact that their doctors aren't wanting to stay, it just makes it all the more scary. And I think that's just one of the many different examples that could show how fostering these sorts of ideas and these sorts of thoughts within your riding and within your society in general can force these people to just say no. We don't want to provide service for you. We're not gonna risk our lives for you. We're not gonna come up and staff these hospitals because it's not safe for us. So why should we make it safe for you?
yeah, well, I think a lot of people don't want to risk their sanity just for
Mm-hmm.
the sake of providing help to a community that doesn't want them there anyways, right? And that's a
Yes.
big problem. I have kind of gone through that sometimes. Like, there is some sort of anger sometimes, that you when someone doesn't want you in a place, and but they
Yeah.
still want you to be there to serve them. It is kind of like, I don't want you to be here, or I wouldn't want you to be here if you were not useful to me, right? Kind of.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a bit uncomfortable because you're like, well, so you just want me because I'm useful for you to serve you, basically, kind of like a slave, right?
Hmm.
Although you pay me and everything. So big difference, but obviously inside of you, it kind of feels like they're just seeing you as a tool. Going back to how we can fix this, because I think this is the most important thing. Like, I think the problem is well stated. There are clear consequences to these issues, but we need to start thinking about solutions, I think. And something that I really liked about you when we talk is that you mentioned quite particularly that you don't really like to label people before you even talk to them.
Hmm.
So you said that you're against cancel culture and you're against labeling people as racist right away. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when it comes to cancel culture, this resurgence and it's a consequence of social media and it's a consequence of the advancement in technology, and it's something that we do have to live with. Cancel culture I find to be incredibly toxic, especially around these sorts of very divisive and sensitive issues. When discussing racism, there's a very fine line between someone who is a straight 100% racist, and someone who just doesn't know. And I know that. I myself 100% can say that in my formative years, I was definitely probably a little racist, just due to the product of the environment I was in, and it was something that opened my eyes. And when I moved to Vancouver, realizing that I held these sorts of prejudices and these beliefs over a number of years, and they were just not true. And I had found that if someone had accused me of being a racist because of a prior comment I made, that would really upset me, and that might even just further entrench my beliefs, because now all of a sudden it's an us versus them scenario because someone's calling me out for whatever offhand comment I made, say 10 years ago. And that's not productive. The racism in general it's a state of mind. It's an ideology. It's something that can be unlearned. And the way to do that is through conversation, through dialogue. And you can't have dialogue if you've all of a sudden you've canceled somebody, and a bunch of Twitter trolls have doxed them, and all of their public information is online. And next thing you know, that person has you've just created yourself a little problem all in itself. Because what if that person goes and starts mobilizing on his own? And it's not productive to call people out and cancel them for something that they did in the past. People learn. People can change. I'm a big believer in that, and people can through dialogue can change their opinions on race. You just need to be patient. You need to be understanding, and you need to be compassionate as to why they believe that way. What For me, it's always, why do you think the way you do? I want to understand that, so then I can better understand, perhaps to help change the way you think. I'm not looking to enforce my beliefs on someone. I just want there to be a common understanding that we're all people, and that we're all humans, we're all Canadians, and that's all it really comes down to. And if you can have these types of conversations without labeling someone a racist, because uh, they'll probably be way more appreciative of the fact that you didn't cancel them and just sat there and talked to them like a human, and sat there and worked out the issues without resorting to so much more draconian methods.
Yeah, for sure. I think, sorry, I think one of the main issues right now it's just this rhetoric of us versus them. I
Yes,
actually see in social media
I
people
agree.
people that I see on Facebook. These are people that I know personally that actually think they're in a war. You know, they call for urgent help for allies, from both sides. You can
Yeah.
see people who believe all of these conspiracy theories. I mean, it is just surprising how many people are not willing to consider using the COVID-19 vaccine. you know there are people that actually think it's going to be dangerous for us, and obviously, apparently there are some side effects, but for some people, right? But we don't.
Yes.
I mean, the side effects for COVID is probably die, right? That's one of the side effects, dying. So I haven't seen anybody that took the vaccine that died. Hopefully that's not the case, but that I think people need to be more understanding that the faster we get vaccinated, the better our society will be. And also, I think there's a lot of extremism in both sides. But
Yes.
but then the problem is when you say yes, there's far right people, but when you talk to other people, I have talked to some people that identify as left or liberals, and I asked them, "Do you think there's such a thing as a far left?" Sometimes they just don't think so. Do you think there's a far left?
Oh, most definitely. The far left definitely exists in Canada. I don't think it exists to the extent that we envision, like say in the United States or in Paris, like France, for example. When I was living in Paris, this was right around when a lot of the Yellow Vest protests started up,
Oh yeah, when do you
and
live there?
I lived there in 2016 to end of 2017, and it was when a lot of the protest against Macron for his reforms started to happen. And that was where I got my first in life encounter with what is known as Antifa, with the whole they were rioting and there was. Oh, it was a mess. Paris was an absolute. It was anarchy in a couple of the arrondissements for quite a few weeks. But I don't think that exists necessarily to that extent in Canada. Um, I just don't think there's a space for it. One thing in Canada is we have had quite a lot of um, mass protests as of late, especially around climate change and the race protests over the past couple of years. And you don't really see the sorts of really far left extremism that you see in the United States. Now that's not to say maybe it's not there. Maybe they're just not as active. But I just don't see them as destructive as they have been in some other locations. Um, I also think it's important to distinguish between um, the far left, Politico, like the base of like the Bernie Sanders progressive wing, and the far left, like extremist wing of, say, the United States. I think those are two separate things that need to be distinguished, because there's a difference between being a progressive and, say, being a straight up anti-fascist socialist extremist. It's completely. I think there it is. I think it is different.
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, these are really complicated issues, and I honestly do not
Yes.
understand the entire. I mean, I don't understand any of the movements, to be honest, and I think I don't understand them because I'm just not part of them. But I try to keep my mind open all the time, and I think keeping my mind open has really. I mean, I think in to some extent, um, makes people label me as as a right wing person sometimes,
Yeah.
because I try to listen to one of the sides that you're not supposed to listen to. You're supposed
Yeah.
to label them, and you're supposed to satanize them. And I think that's one of the things that I thought really interesting on your approach, because you were
Hmm.
basically just approaching these people and telling them, look, let's talk, and let's figure out a way for us to reach this understanding. Because I think you're right. I think they understand that you're a person, and even though they believe that maybe their culture is being diluted, they also know that you're bringing value to them. So, like, I think as soon
Hmm.
as you start talking, and then you say, "Look, I just want to feed my kids, and I just want to raise my family here. I want to make sure that this economy is more prosperous." Then you realize that you have more things in common than you have in uh,
Exactly.
in contrast, right?
Exactly.
So once you realize that there's more in common between you, the only difference is maybe where you were born and the color of your skin, basically maybe the cultural context, but most of the people really want the same things, right? You want your kids to be
Exactly.
safe. You don't want people to be struggling with drugs in the streets. You don't want people to be living in the streets. Everybody, I don't know anybody that's not complaining about homelessness. People from the left and people from the right are complaining about homelessness. Nobody wants more homeless, right? Everybody wants things to be
Yeah.
solved. So there is just the difference in approaches. I think some people want the government to build facilities for them, and some people just want them to take ownership and to build their own lives, and you know they believe in a more like a personal ownership kind of
Yeah.
approach. But at the end of the day, we all know that the government needs to do something, and we are all telling the government to do something. So that's just the difference. But I think
Yes.
you are that's one of the things I was really impressed by, honestly. And um one of the but coming back to the solution, we know that universities are probably the place to begin this dialogue, because
Hmm.
universities are open to dialogue and stuff like that. You're familiar with SFU. Let's use SFU as the platform. How would you probably go about start doing this in start uh, establishing this dialogue in SFU?
At SFU. So first, you would want to reach out to the various uh, groups on campus to get all of their various opinions. I would want you'd want like representation from, say, like the African Students Union. You'd want representation from the indigenous communities on campus. And you'd also want representation from, say, the very large Asian communities as well, because SFU is such a multicultural. And we both know, like, it's just this absolute mash of different cultures and ideas and people from all over the world. And you need for you to be able to get it right, you would need to have that sort of representation. You'd also need to have dialogue at the highest levels, because what it really comes down to is having these sorts of conversations. One thing to highlight, I think, would be the absolutely messy situation about the Black alumnus that was arrested on campus a couple of weeks ago. And that has caused an uproar amongst the BIPOC community at SFU, and I think justifiably so. And I think that this leaves an opportunity for the administration of the university to have these sorts of sit down conversations with the student groups, because SFU does have a very spotty history at listening to us. I know that, like, the student union building, for example, it was a whole struggle to get some of these groups space inside the building. And just having like this is just the perfect opportunity for the university to extend that olive branch and have that call to action and that discussion. It and I think that's what needs to happen is representatives from the various student body needs to get in a room with the administration and talk about what the next steps could be, whether it's assembling a sort of committee within the university to help address some of the more systemic issues. Using the example of that alumnus being arrested, one important thing I think would be the discussion and evaluation of calling the RCMP on campus, and perhaps that's a discussion about training in regards to the security services that SFU Whether they contract out, I'm not sure, or hire them internally. But I think these are the kinds of things that can be done, like assembling some sort of committee to begin discussing the issues at hand from the proper representation with the proper representation of the various groups that make up the student body.
Yeah, and I mean, these are you're touching on a lot of really difficult topics. I think in terms of like how are we gonna understand this? The situation with the Black alumnus that got arrested was a really tough one, and I saw a lot of people saying that they do not.
Passion from both sides.
Yeah, but yeah, and look, I did not. I honestly, well, I don't know anything about the case, so I just know what happened, or what was reported, and well, like I just hope the person is safe and the person can start moving on with his life, and hopefully he manages to recover from this soon, right? That's all I can hope. And as soon as I started to see the passion that was created in the comment section, then I decided to actively just take myself out of it. I never commented anything. I actually approached to see if I could help in some way, but I did not want to comment publicly anything, because I realized that the dialogue that was ensued in these comments were just not productive.
Exactly.
I realized that a lot of these, if you want to help, well, approach privately the person that you think will be most likely to direct you towards the places where you can help, right? But then the way I saw that, I mean, that's a clear example of how there is a battle of us versus them, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like there was no there were some people that were trying to reach the middle point, and some people that were trying to just create a safe space for dialogue. But at that point it was too late. Some people were already heated, and they were just like, shut up. And
Yeah.
you name it. So
And that, I think it's just I think it should just serve as an example of why these sorts of conversations need to be happening, and why, like, if we, for using SFU as an example, right, is if change is to happen on campus, there needs to be that space for dialogue and for conversation, and there needs to be pressure on the administration to say answer to some of these pressing issues at hand. And I know there was a new incoming president last I had seen. I believe her name is Joy Johnson. I could be wrong.
yes,
And
yeah.
she, I know she has made a big point of hoping to advance conversations on issues like reconciliation. But to be honest, we haven't really seen anything that can, besides, say, like, I know they changed the design on the regalia for graduation to reflect Indigenous design, but besides that, like, there hasn't really been any big, centerpiece thing that the administration is doing. And I think there is just such a good opportunity here for SFU to begin to have these conversations. It's just a matter of getting all of these people in a room and talking.
Yeah, well, I understand your point, but I think this sort of moderation, maybe, yeah, like the moderation role for these conversations, need to be a little bit passed down to the SFSS, I think.
Yes.
The SFSS is the Simon Fraser Student Society, and the reason why I think that is because there are people. I mean, clearly we're all students, right? And if people from our own cohort are the ones facilitating these conversations, that then it is, I think, it is easier to begin a conversation, or that's how I imagine it anyways. But we saw that a lot of people were actually blaming the SFSS for doing for allegedly taking biases and stuff.
And
Look,
I think that's also perhaps a strike on the SFSS's PR, just for over the past couple of years, and
Yeah.
I
Well,
think they just have a bad rap for university politics aside. They don't necessarily have the best public image, and I think repairing that is the only way to use them, I guess, as a vehicle for change.
yeah, I try to be part of this success, and I saw the potential. And I think
Mm-hmm.
honestly, like I really like most of the things that the current administration is doing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very happy that that they're able to work together and be able to get things done. They seem to all be in the same page, and I think that's one of the most important things that
Exactly.
they're. Look, I usually prefer a little bit more of a diversity in terms of diversity of thought, but we have seen how badly it develops at the
Mm-hmm.
SFS. Like it usually yeah, it usually leads to conflicts that generate drama that basically just end up wasting a lot of resources.
Overshadowing what could be a productive, tenure on the SFSS.
Mhm. Um, and do you think the university maybe, I mean, one of the things I was maybe thinking about was that the university could introduce active listening courses for most faculties, because I think that's one of the skills that we are really not
Mm-hmm.
developing in university. I think we're developing two of the most important skills that a human can have nowadays, which is the ability to express ourselves via writing and
Yep.
speaking, right? And the second one I'm not so sure about, because most people are really afraid of speaking in public. But let's say that SFU is doing a decent job at speaking and writing, building those skills. But I see that they are really struggling at getting us to listen. I mean, just look at how we listen to our professors. Most people are in Facebook while the professor are are instructing the lectures. So listening is definitely one of the hardest part of the communication process. And right now, I think we just don't do it very well. Do you think that's maybe one of the approaches that the university can take
I
and help us to incentivize dialogue?
I do think you're probably on the right track there, Miguel, to be honest. I do know that SFU does want to, like you say, they do emphasize writing and the conversation aspects in, say, like their seminar approaches that they take, um, where they do try to encourage conversation among students. I like that. I think it would be accurate to say that the listening isn't necessarily as important as the expression, I guess, and being able to argue your ideas rather than listen to others. Um, I would say that's accurate. What did you have in mind for a sort of listening style course? What would you suggest?
Yeah. Well, so let me give you a little bit of background why I say
Yeah.
this. So I used to be a guy that only spoke, and then I used to have a girlfriend that told me, "Look, man, you speak too much and you don't listen a lot." That's what she said, man. And so And so I told her, okay, so what can I do to fix it, right? And then she said, well, you can start by listening. And then I started to understand how important it was. Look, I didn't start listening because I wanted to understand societal issues. I just started listening because I wanted to understand what my ex-girlfriend was saying at the time. And sounds funny, but it is the truth, man. So then obviously it didn't change from one day to another,
Yeah.
but I took a business course, and in this business course they talk about active listening. I think the course was business 272, organizational behavior. And the reason why they talk about active listening is because of this same problem. In organizations there is drama, and there are all of these issues that we see nowadays, people competing
Yeah.
for a position and things like that. But then I took it as an opportunity to actually learn how to listen. So there was this active listening skill, which I do not remember the proper steps, but basically what it is you listen, and instead of thinking how I'm gonna reply to that, you basically take in all the info, and then once you take that info, then you wait until they finish speaking, because obviously that's when the last piece of data is coming in, and then you analyze it and try to do it, take your time and then respond. So that sounds like something that not a lot of people do. So some people listen to the first few sentences, or maybe the first few words of what you say, and then they make a decision on your position based on that. So what sometimes what happens to me when I'm speaking with my friends, they cut me in the middle of what I'm saying because they think that what I'm saying is inappropriate. And then I'm like, well, if you let me finish, then you'll see where I'm going to say, right? So that's a process, I think, to basically uh, let people know that they first need to take in all the info, and then analyze it, and see how to respond. And I think that doesn't really take a lot of time, because they do the analysis. Oh, sorry, they do the analysis very quick into the
Mm-hmm.
communication, right? They are just impatient, and they just want to respond real quick, and that's why we get into these arguments where two people are speaking at the same time. As you can see, they're really not responding to each other. They're just barking like dogs, almost, right?
Yeah.
They're just like,
No, 100%. I'm with you. I'm with you. It's just, can we teach ourselves to hold on to our thoughts for just a couple seconds longer to get the rest of the full picture without bursting out and making assumptions on what you're saying without actually getting all that information.
yeah,
Oh, and that I think is quite poignant. I think that we tend to not we tend to just make these quick assumptions without receiving all the information. Maybe is that because it's convenient, or maybe it's because it's quicker, I guess, in this case. But it says something about us as a people, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I if we want to be more compassionate to people, we need to start by listening
Listening
more
to them,
to
yeah.
people. How can you be compassionate if you don't really understand them, right? And how can you be
Mm-hmm.
compassionate if you don't really want to listen to them? You only want to tell them what to do. And that's the most dictatorial way of doing it, because you wanna um you you wanna just tell people how to react based on what you believe is right. And and look, I think there's a lot of people doing that. Like, I see people that say, well, you should work more, right? Or you should save more. Like, there is all these people just offering solutions. I don't know if you remember, I was your CA, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
I
so
remember Miguel.
you remember that, right? So we actually had a conversation in which well, that was part of the train of the CA training. Sometimes the people from the community will come and talk to us, and all we needed to do was listening to you, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully be able to offer you the resources that you needed to. And I think we had a couple of these conversations, and I hope I did a good job at listening to you. But after we had these conversations, I remember it feels really very interesting, because you start to understand another person very well. You're like, wow, I didn't know all these thoughts that this person was having. And and I had these conversations, I don't know, like a week, maybe like 3 or 4. And that's when I started to practice these active listening skills. And look, I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate taking on this role as a community advisor, because it allowed me to practice. And hopefully more people will be able to do that. I encourage people to maybe listen to their mom or to their dad, or maybe to listen to their kids, right? If you're a mom and a dad, then listen to
Yeah.
your kids. uh, because everybody says, oh, this new generation, these millennials, are so stupid or whatever. Well, what about you listen to them, right? What about you understand what their problems are? Maybe these are the same problems that you used to have when you were younger, and you can offer a solution, right? I don't know.
Maybe there's a reason why people. I always say that there is a reason why people are protesting, even if, say, the protests in question may not be something that everyone agrees with. And a good example would be like, say, all the protests that have been happening about all the lockdowns and the Great Reset, as it were. And there's a reason these people feel this disenfranchised, right? There's a reason that they are so quick to believe that the government is a part of this overarching international conspiracy to completely change the way of life and the way our society works. And there is reason for that. And getting down to the source of why it is these people think that, I think that's how these sorts of conversations, that's the way these sorts of conversations need to go. You need to listen. You're right. We need to listen to them to understand why it is they're so quick to believe these sorts of, these crazy ideas about geopolitics and all that. What is it that is causing them to think that, and how can we bridge that divide?
Yeah, definitely. I think another thing the government can do to actually improve the way we think individually is to put more emphasis on critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in high school, the high school I was with worked directly with one of the major universities in Mexico, and this this university started to put a lot of pressure on critical thinking classes. So basically, we always had a math class, Spanish class, and a critical thinking class. And what the
Okay.
critical thinking class was designed to do was to bring you through the scientific method and also how to apply it basically on your everyday life.
Yeah.
Or, so we had this class, and the professor was super intelligent. He was really interesting as well. And one of the main components of these classes was you had to bring up, I mean, he will say, okay, homosexuality, this is one of the topics, right? So he will ask one person to come up to speak and basically say, okay, what do you think about homosexuality? And then he will bring another person to bring up and speak for like 5 minutes about homosexuality. So two people
Yeah.
were giving their points of view, and then everybody was to deconstruct their presentations and their ideas, and then we, based on that, we were looking into which one was flawed and which one wasn't. So surprisingly, everybody was flawed with their ideas, because some people
Yes.
thought, yeah, well, homosexuality is just a choice, or some people thought, well, homosexuality is genetic. So like, because we were high school kids, so we didn't have idea of what
Yeah.
homosexuality was or where it's coming from.
It was either
So
it was good or it was bad, and you had to come up with reasons to support your argument, even though you didn't know why it was good or it was bad.
yeah, exactly. So people were just saying, well, I think homosexuality is good because my brother is homosexual and my brother is good, therefore it is a good thing. And look, that was kind of the way of doing it in that class. But then the important takeaway of that class was we were able to talk about difficult subjects, but
Mm-hmm.
we were not to judge the person that was making the arguments, because when we knew that
Yes.
nobody knew shit. So what we wanted to understand was how we were constructing arguments and how easily it was for some people to be very convincing and some others not to be convincing, because there's people that are eloquent, and there are people
Yes.
that can put their words in very sweet ways and resonate with the majority, or resonate with a very vocal minority. So
I would have to. I have to. Like, I have a similar story of
for
that.
sure.
In high school, we had a similar class in my high school. It was called social justice, and so social justice was it was the elective that a lot of students really wanted to take, just purely because of the approach of the teacher that taught it. The teacher, who I won't name for privacy reasons, but he was very well renowned at our high school for treating all of his students like adults, and opening the door to the sorts of conversations that were very taboo at the time in my town. My town is primarily evangelical so Protestant-esque, and so a lot of the people hold very traditional values. And when you're 15 and your teacher asks you to debate on abortion, that in itself it's quite empowering to be able to have these sorts of conversations. And I know it was what helped ignite the spark in me to begin to deconstruct sorts of big issues like race and economic inequality and all that. The unfortunate thing, and once again, I think it just paints a picture of sort of the issue at hand, is that teacher was unfortunately run out of my hometown. His ideas were considered to be dangerous, I guess you could say, sort of like in the old days. And he no longer teaches, unfortunately, because that was the only class that taught critical thinking in any sort of manner at the high school. And it just highlights the disconnect between teaching critical thinking and in schools, because it's just not happening in communities where it really matters the most.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're not able to have difficult conversations, then we're gonna just react like monkeys do, like chimps.
Exactly.
Chimps kill each other.
Yeah.
They kill each other because they don't agree on something. They are like,
Yeah.
oh, you make me angry and I hate being angry, so I'm gonna kill you. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Right? like that's kind of the reasoning we're following nowadays. Is like,
Yeah.
you don't believe in gun rights? I think I'm gonna kill you. What?
I'm gonna stock up on all my guns just because
like,
you don't believe in guns. I'm gonna buy all the guns that you didn't buy.
Yeah, or like, I'm not saying that gun activists are trying to kill people. I'm just saying that any activist that is not willing to have a conversation with people that do not believe what they believe, then it is just deemed to react viscerally.
Yes.
You're not going to react to the best of your possibilities just because you don't have all the data in available to you, right? And you have neglected to collect this data. So when people say educate yourself, so this is something I've been told, and I kind of hate when people tell me that, but I understand it is true. So sometimes I ask a question, and usually those are difficult questions, and then someone tells me, you need to educate yourself. Don't put the burden on me. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'll educate myself on that matter. But the problem is there are for certain issues, there are two ways you can educate yourself, right? You Google it, and then you'll find maybe the right-wing perspective on it, and then or you can find the left-wing perspective on it. And it is usually very well, both of them are really well written, that both of them make a lot of sense. So I think the problem is which one are you going to find first? If you find,
I think that a metaphor could be like, say a carpenter goes out and he is told to build a house. He's given, in this case, say Google is all of your materials, right? It's all of the knowledge at your disposal to build this house, but you don't know how to put it together. You don't have the tools, you don't have the hammer, you don't have the saw, right? You don't have the ability to put all of this house together, even though, say, all that knowledge is right there in front of you, right? Even if it's right there, if you don't know how to put the door on or to install a window or to critically think and determine if something's misinformation or it's not, right? If you don't have that ability, then telling someone to go and educate themselves, it doesn't really do anything. It's just going to push them to whichever opinion is more in line with what they believe. And I find that that's very often what happens is you tell someone to go educate themselves and they're like, okay. And then they go and they type in a Google search and they find the opinion that most is in line with what they already believed on the matter.
Yeah, and then the problem is that Google or YouTube, if you're looking at YouTube videos, they will just give you more of what you really like.
Exactly.
Right? and then you're like, look, I've seen, let's say, 100 videos that say what I believe, and I only hear you saying something that I don't believe, so you
Exactly.
must be wrong.
You must be wrong.
Yeah, you must be wrong, because there's like 100, like 99% of people that I listen to say what I believe, and
Yeah.
you are the only one that I don't. So that says the opposite. So you're wrong. And then they just start fighting again. This is a visceral way of doing it. And look, it's such a shame that your community, made this professor stop teaching. And again, this is why these conversations are difficult to have, because oftentimes communities just don't want to have these conversations.
Exactly.
In Mexico, we have the saying, uh, "Don't talk about politics or football or religion in the table, in the dinner
Hmm.
table." And I mean, right now I'm thinking, why why is that, right? Like, you cannot talk about football in the dinner table. Like, right? Is it are we that bad? Like, is football like really gonna,
The end all be all.
yeah, is it gonna jeopardize our friendships? Like, what the fuck? So and then obviously I understand religion and politics, but football. So then you realize that most of these things is just about people risking their identities. I think they say, look, I'm not going to talk football, religion, and politics. And all of these three things, if you get the common denominator, is your identity and your ego is attached to all three of them.
Yeah, and if we sit here and have these sorts of conversations, you might change my mind on how I feel about these things, and I don't. That scares me, right? Like, if we sit here and talk about, say, left wing politics versus right wing politics, and then I say something about, say, universal base income that you really agree with, and then there's that realization that, say, that right wing person might actually be a bit more left wing than they thought, and that's scary, right?
Yeah, of course. And look, I don't know if you have gone through this kind of issue, but oftentimes when something in your life changes, where and that thing hold a part of your identity, it makes you feel that part of you die, right? Psychologically. Like, for example, when I moved from living with my parents to living alone, um, I, like, everybody wants to move from their away from their parents for a bit, right, and be an
Yeah.
adult. But for some reason, I was so sad and I was crying like hell in the airplane, right? And then I was thinking, why? Look, I did this because I wanted to do it. Why am I so sad? And I realized that was because I just killed part of my identity,
Hmm.
psychologically. And similarly, I used to have a girlfriend, and when we broke up, even though we still remain friends, for some reason I felt so sad, and I was like, why am I feeling so sad? And it is because part of my identity was attached to her in a way. And the same thing happens with politics and football and religion. I think, once you change your opinion, even you understand that maybe your political opinion was wrong, and then you change it. Well, it is so difficult, man. It's so uncomfortable to kill that part of you and then move it to another area, and then change your identity, because I don't know if we're supposed to do this as humans, right? I don't know if that's something that we were expected to do with our evolution. So
Mm.
it is just uncomfortable and hard, right?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like, we as humans, like, we associate ourselves with these various, I think it comes down to tribes, like, and it's a very primal thing that we as humans do. We group ourselves within groups and out groups, and when you find out that you might not actually be a part of that in group, it's scary, and it's kind of, it's frightening. I went through something kind of like that. It was when I took a little foray into party politics in university, as every political science kid does. And the party that I associated myself with, I was associated with for a number of years. And something happened, and it was quite a large issue of the day. The media cycles had all picked it up, and it was quite a scandal. And I went and talked with my member of parliament, and I talked with a couple of the ministers that I had met through my tenure with the party. And I wanted to have that frank conversation with them. And you get what you get, and that's the typical, roundabout political speech of talking points that you're going to hear on TV for weeks on end. And that's when I realized that, maybe this identity that I've given for myself with this party is just not for me. And it was really sad because I felt that I was making headway and making gains for being so young. And but definitely my affiliation to this party, it just withered away like that. And I could feel a part of me just that I had invested so much time into over the years just disappeared just like that. And it was kind of soul wrenching and gutting, but it was also, I think, the natural evolution. And so I was at peace with it, as I'm sure you were at peace with that small part of you dying on your way to Canada, right?
Yeah. One thing that one of my previous guests in this podcast told me that leaders don't run for office.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me there's no politician that's an actual leader. And then I asked him why. And he said, look, natural leaders and real leaders, they are put in there by people, but not because they want to be there. Usually it's people that are forcing them to be in that position. People start asking them questions and start putting the pressure on them
Mm-hmm.
to become this leader that they expect. So so when you're talking about this story with your political party, well, oftentimes I think that's probably the worst approach to identify to a party, right? Because you're dealing with a group of people most of the time.
Oh, for sure.
That are all trying to benefit themselves in some way.
Yes.
Right? And
we'll call that my naivety of being 19 years old.
Yeah. And look, I did take part of politics, or did attempt to take part on the SFS's politics. I ran for president.
Yeah.
And obviously that means I'm not a real leader because I ran for office.
Don't sell yourself so short, Miguel.
Look, obviously there are not hard truths here, but what I'm just saying is, look, I did attempt to become part of the system in a way, and I actually, I did think that I could make a change and I could help the students. Actually, I wasn't there for my own gain, because if I did actually take office, then I'll have to spend another $10,000 just to be able to complete the full term.
Do the things.
Yeah. because I had to take another semester, right? And I pay international tuition, so it's not like I'm there for the money, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm there because I wanted to do some changes, and that's why I said that I'm really happy that at least the people that won are doing the things that I think are benefiting students. Like, obviously, I don't agree with everything they do. And once I told them I don't agree with everything you do, they asked me, they were surprised, and they were like, what don't you agree with? Because I feel that that's a problem. Once you say I don't agree with everything you do, then they got kind of upset. And I'm like, well, that you possibly don't agree with everything you did yesterday, right? So why are you angry at me? Like, it is a big problem. Like, you should take disagreement as a natural thing. Like, you're not perfect, and I think right now, unfortunately, we're educated to feel that everything we do, people should agree with it, or disagreement oftentimes is taken as an offense, which is kind of a crazy thing. But anyways, I think they are doing a good job in what they're doing a good job. I think, like, I like most of the things I've seen from them, and I'd like to see more of that in the next administration. More, the main thing I like about them is that they're able to get together. They're able to utilize the resources as efficiently as they can, and they're able to provide value to students. Look, that's what they're for in there. They're not in there to create drama like previous administrations, and I'm happy with that. Um, one last little tidbit that I will want to ask you, because obviously
Sure.
we can spend time on these conversations forever, but I want to make sure that um, that people get maybe like a summarized piece of you. Imagine that you meet an 18-year-old Trystan, or let's say 19, because that's when you went to meet this politician.
Hmm.
Imagine you meet this 19-year-old Trystan, and then you have to give him 5 pieces of advice. What would they be?
5 pieces of advice. Ooh, this is a good one.
Yeah, it's a bit
Um,
hard, but yeah, it's gonna be good.
the first piece of advice I would give myself would be to um, always be compassionate. I find that compassion is something that we generally lack, and it was something I definitely think I lacked back in those days. Um, so being able to see the other side and have with understanding and caring and kindness. Um, I definitely think that holding compassion to your heart is very important for when we're trying to address things like this. Another piece of advice I would give would be uh, don't go to Rotterdam, Trystan, in a year. Instead, just stay in Amsterdam for another couple of weeks.
Okay,
uh,
why is that? Tell me.
may, it's just it's a whole story. But I ended up in a pretty funny situation in Rotterdam over New Year's that I really don't want to relive. The other another humor aside, another piece of advice I'd give to myself would be um, to really make a point of um, keeping connections with the people around me. I know that my journey has been um, quite arduous over the past number of years. There's been a lot of struggles and hardship, and I think if I could keep those connections that I may have lost over the years through my travels or through whatever movements I've been making, um, that would be something that I really really would like, is to be able to say that I had kept those connections. Um, Another one would be to uh, keep my nose to the dirt and keep powering on. I know the and just to keep working hard, because young Trystan at that time was a lot more idealistic and probably a bit more pessimistic, I think, at the same time, with outlook, and but with a lot of big ideas, and just keep powering through it. And no matter what the hardships that are to come, uh, if you just keep working hard, it will pay off. And I think that I have seen that. I've seen that the fruits of my labor through this TED talk I've been giving, and the fact that people kind of want to hear what I have to say about these sorts of issues. And I think that says a lot. The last thing would be to always stay true to who you are, or I am, I guess I'd be saying to myself. Uh, People will try to push you left or right or up or down, right? But I think it's important to always just stay true to yourself, and the way you view things, but also being open to change and to criticism. But at the same time, like knowing who you are and embracing that, uh, I think is very important. But yeah, those are my 5 pieces of advice.
Well, I mean, they were amazing because they were really targeted towards your young self, and I could see
Yeah.
how they will really help you. I wanna thank you for taking the time in these holidays to talk to me. It was
Thank you for
really
having me.
No, it was amazing to hear you, and it was a really easy conversation to have about very difficult topics. And I
Mhm.
wish it was this easy to talk to other people. So, if yeah, just when do you think the TED Talk is going to be published on YouTube?
We are still that is still up in the air. I have been very aggressively trying to get some information out of my organizers, but it's still unclear. But I will be posting that and blasting it everywhere as soon as I know the release schedule.
Amazing. So, in the meantime, they can listen to you here. So,
Exactly.
yeah, perfect. Anyways, man, thank you for coming. Thank you for the listeners to take the time to listen to this whole conversation. And if you have any more questions, make sure that you write them on the comments or just send me a direct inbox. I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. And have a great Sunday. It's Sunday today, so have a great Sunday, Trystan.
and you
Hope we can keep in touch.
and you too, Miguel. Take care.
Bye bye.